Hello and welcome to Bhagavatam. Today we're on the third chapter of this incredibly exciting adventure. We have a lot ahead of us. You're going to learn a lot today about what is typically called Hinduism, but that name is actually quite false. But before we get started, let me just bring in the title here. And yes, so we are on the first canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, chapter 3. And with that, let's get started with the mantra. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. We invoke the blessings of Vasudev Shri Krishna, because it is for him that we enjoy this, and about him that we enjoy this. So, welcome to all of you, and thank you for being here. So let's take up our first topic, and that is religion versus Dharma. I think you'll find this very interesting. Unfortunately, the description of the two is quite different. Most people think they're the same. But actually, religion, if as defined is in the dictionaries, is the belief in and worship of a superhuman controlling power, especially a personal god or gods. And also it is a particular system of faith and worship. There are many different kinds of religion. There's what's called the theistic religions, where there's the belief in a superior immortal being. There's animism, where people believe in ghosts and spirits. There's totemic religions, where they believe worship of symbols. There's, of course, the New Age, and that's become a religion of its own, because although it's an eclectic collection of beliefs, nevertheless, it still has people quite embedded in those beliefs and believing them quite blindly. And to the list, I would add atheism, because that has a strong belief system, a pre-decided prejudice of its own that refuses to accept anything that is supernatural or even the possibility of it. And that's almost as fanatical as any religion. So I think I'd personally like to award atheism with the quality of being a religion now. I'm sure they'd hate that, but the 12 main religions in the world go like this. There's Christianity, Judaism, Islam, Shinto, Baha'i, and interestingly, most of the Eastern ones, you'll see them on the right side: Buddhism, Hinduism, Jainism, Sikhism, Taoism, Confucianism, and Zoroastrianism. Interesting that they would want to make the eastern part of the world into an ism. That seems to be the sort of strategy to make it somehow different. And you know what? Thank you. I appreciate them doing that, because in fact, they're quite different. The difference lies in this, that religions typically have one God, one prophet, one book. And Dharma teachings, well, have a philosophy or guidelines for a better life with the goal of transcendence. Now you might say, wait a minute, I've come across things that, I've been doing, which talk about one God. And there was one book, the Bhagavad Gita, which we were doing till now. You might say, well, wait a minute, aren't you talking about the same thing? I said, no. That's because we're approaching it from a particular angle. You see, the entire Vedic literature is based on many hundreds, almost thousands of books. And those books, some of which were destroyed and many of which remain, vary from the Rig Veda, the Sama Veda, the Yajur Veda, Atharva Veda, the Upanishads, and Puranas, and so much more. The Bhagavad Gita is a tiny part of that. The Vedas have every possible concept that you can have in there, from atheism to things that are partly atheistic, that is to say, they might believe in karma and reincarnation, but not in a soul, like in Buddhism. Or you might have karma, reincarnation, and soul, but no God. And then in others, you'll have karma, reincarnation, soul, and God. Now, God there could be either one of many demigods who people worship, or they could be one monotheistic God. In other words, the Vedic system is a range of things and cannot be defined as one set path. And that's the primary difference. Dharma and religion share a very common goal, but they attain it very differently. The religion says there is only one way to get to God, and Dharma says there are many ways. They're very accepting, very tolerating, very welcoming of different paths. And this was taken advantage of by many of the people who came to India and started to take advantage of the teachings and the people over there. And they introduced the idea, that at least initially the Muslim invaders introduced the idea of Hinduism. They called the people across the Sindhu River Hindus, which there was no such thing earlier. And then the British made that the official religion of India. But there was never an official religion. There was never a religion. In fact, what people followed in India was what is called Sanatana or eternal Dharma. What is Dharma? Dharma is actually the nature of a thing. So you can say fire is hot. The Dharma of fire is that it's hot. The Dharma of water is that it's wet. The Dharma of humanity. What does it mean to be a human being? What is the intrinsic nature of a human being? That was the study that the yogis and the rishis undertook. What is the highest level that a human being can attain to? What is the greatest potential that lies within us? That is what they wanted to study and understand. And to that extent, they performed their own experiments through various kinds of austerities and all kinds of, practices, as well as calling upon the divine for guidance. And therefore the Vedas are called apaurushaya. That is, that they are not spoken by any human. They are in fact divinely guided. And that could be said of many other religions as well. However, the focus here is on practice, sadhana. And that practice makes all the difference. And that walking, living by those teachings is what matters. It's not enough that you're a priest who rings some bells or does some rituals or does something. You got to walk your talk. And that's why the word acharya was created by the rishis and saintly people of the time who were writing the Vedas. They had a difference between the person who is a guru or a teacher and an acharya. The acharya was one who not only taught but also lived by example. So we have come across many such incredibly great souls, and it's been an honor to meet people like that along the way. And I hope that all of you can become that, the people who not only listen to this teaching but also live it in your own life. All right, so from here we're going to take on one of the big topics of this next chapter, and that is the universe. Okay, so a lot of people talk about the universe as if the universe was some kind of a god, right? They'll especially in the New Age community, they refer to the universe instead of the word God. They don't want to personalize it. They want to keep it nice and impersonal. But what is the universe? The universe is a bunch of material substance as you see in this world today. So is this world God? Is the tree God? Is the plant God? Is the human God? And if you were to say that, then I'd say, well, you're on the right track, because there's a whole lot there that is true. But today we're going to study a little further about the universe, and that is to say the Vedic version of the universe. And I'm going to give you an idea as to how it connects with modern day science, especially when we're looking at physics, right? The quantum physics. In that, you're going to find some amazing parallels to the Vedic idea of the universe. So quantum physics says that the further quantum physicists peer into the nature of reality, the more evidence they are finding that everything is energy at the most fundamental levels. They in fact say that reality is merely an illusion, although a very persistent one. They've been studying black holes, and they say that the black holes are proof that we live in a holographic universe. This means that what we perceive as 3D reality is stored on a 2D surface, including time. This means that everything we see and experience is an illusion. This is not This was written 5,000 years ago by the rishis and by Vyas, and before that, tens of thousands of years even prior to that. But it is now being confirmed by scientists with their study of black holes and of physics. So what does that look like and what does it mean? Let's take a look at this picture here. It's something like that, a hologram, right? That's how they're conceiving it. Now, as far as spiritual practitioners go, their idea of the universe is this, that there is this material world, and then beyond this material world, there is the light. This is what most people, especially in modern times, especially those who are spiritual, they believe in. That light is referred to in the Vedas as Brahma Jyoti. Jyoti means light, and Brahma is the manifestation of, is the meaning of divine light. So it's not just ordinary light like a light bulb, but rather it is a divine light. What does that mean? It means that it is a realm beyond the material world from which all of us come and to which all of us return. Now, that's a state of consciousness, pure light. The Vedas, however, also say something else, especially in this Srimad Bhagavatam. They say that in that light are innumerable planets, the highest of which, the most supreme of which, is Goloka. Goloka is the planet of Krishna, wherein he lives and has his pastimes in Leela with all his devotees. We'll get to know a little bit more about that in just a few minutes. But Krishna, as he has shown himself to us in this world 5,000 years ago, so you're saying he's God and he has pastimes that he showed here, and he does what? He does those pastimes there? That's right. Krishna, just as he came here to this earth, came to show us what it's like to be with God. He came to show us that when you're with God, it's not some boring little thing you do. It's a grand adventure. It's the adventure of a lifetime. Singing, dancing, playing, rejoicing, celebrating life. So that's what it's like. And that's the highest planet within the spiritual realm, within the light. And there is what is called eternal Leela, Nitya Leela, that is occurring along with all the loved ones, Krishna with all his beloved, male, female, animals, plants, everything, right? So that's the highest planet in the spiritual sky. Then the rest of the light has something else that's very interesting that most people don't talk about or know about, and that is it has many planets within it called the Vaikuntha Planets. And in those planets, well, see the one with the lotus there? That's Krishna's planet, Goloka. But the rest of them are also planets wherein you can exist as a being in a spiritual form. In other words, not a material form, not a physical body, but rather a spiritual form that is not subject to birth, death, old age, or disease, or any of the changes or vagaries of this world. You get to be with God in one of his different incarnations and be able to enjoy being there. Now, there's a big difference between Goloka and the planets in Vaikuntha. In Goloka, where you have Krishna, Krishna is worshipped as a friend, as a lover, as an intimate. There's an intimate relationship. But on the Vaikuntha planets, the same Krishna is now in his Vishnu form with 4 hands, and he's worshipped with awe and reverence. He's seen as great, we're seen as small. God sits on the throne, we are the worshippers. Not in Goloka, not in Krishna's planet. It's not like that. Now, if you also look at this picture a little further, and you look down at the bottom, I think you'll find that, well, this is the picture in Vaikuntha, and of Krishna sitting on the throne, like I was saying earlier. But if you look at this picture here, in the bottom, little circle that you see over there, right? That's the material world. With all its trillions of planets, with all its millions of galaxies, all of that is just one tiny part of the spiritual universe. That's the amazing news for you. The reality of where we come from and where we aim to go back to is the spiritual world. That is the ultimate reality. Krishna says, one who has understood this never returns to this temporary and miserable world, but comes back to my abode. So in that abode, you could choose to come as, you could choose to merge with the light and be one with the light in that sense, or you could choose to be on one of the Vaikuntha planets and worship God as the Lord and Master, or you could be on the planet of Krishna and be with him in the most intimate and loving way. That is a personal choice. No, as I said earlier, the system of the Vedas is never to impose anything on anyone. You want to choose to be here, no problem. You want to be here forever and go through all the ups and downs of this world, by all means do it. No one's forcing you, no one's pushing you. There is no right or wrong, right? The world has its problems, it has its karma, it has its consequences, but hey, that's just part of what you get to do out here. And all of that, in fact, is not a bad thing. We get to learn a lot. We get to grow a lot through all the experiences we have here. And in that process, our soul evolves, preparing us to be able to go back to be with God. So it's a grand adventure. Either way you look at it, life is absolutely amazing. Now, let's take a look at what happens in the creation of the material world. So since the material world is a tiny part of the spiritual world, what happens and how is God present everywhere within this? Now, the Vedas present this in a very unusual fashion, to say the least. And you might find yourself thinking, oh my God, this is really strange, this is weird. But bear with me, and I will try to explain it to you in a way that makes sense to the modern scientific quantum physics type mind. All right? So I know it can be a little odd. So the first beginnings of the material creation are done by what is called Karnodakshayi Vishnu. The word Karan from the word Karnodakshayi, Karan means cause. So he is the original cause, laying down in a state of trance, in state of meditation. And through that meditation begins the process of being able to generate the different planets and universes and all of that. So just as you see in this picture, from his pores emanate universes. From the pores of his skin emanate universes as he lays there in trance. Now, is Karnodakshayi Vishnu literal? I don't know. Is it metaphorical? Maybe. Maybe it's literal. Maybe it's metaphorical. I have no idea. What I do know is this, that universes generate from the body of God, however you want to visualize that. I find this a very useful visualization, but maybe you prefer not having a form. Maybe you prefer having a form that helps you understand this or visualize this. Whatever way works for you. I think it's to help you understand how the universes, all of them, the galaxies, the solar systems, all of that just emanate like bubbles out of the body of God and then dissolve back with every in-breath, with every inhalation. With every exhalation they are born, and with every inhalation they are destroyed. So, yeah, and that it refers to as Mahavishnu. Another way of understanding Vishnu is the Mahavishnu form. Now, the second layer, each universe has within it another Vishnu called the Garbhodakshayi Vishnu. Now, those of you that know a little bit of Hindi know that Garbha means the womb. And so there is, from the navel of Vishnu, now emerges a lotus, the stem, and on top of that a lotus, and on top of that is seated Brahma. So this Garbhodakshayi Vishnu is also known as the Adi Purush, the original person. He's known as Narayan. And when you take a look at Brahma arising from that, this is a top view of Vishnu lying down, and Brahma coming out of his navel. So that's where the idea of the Garbha, coming out from the womb of Vishnu, from the womb of God, comes Brahma. Now that Brahma becomes in turn, he's empowered by Vishnu to create the universe. And within the stem of the lotus, he creates 7 upper planetary systems, which the Shastras, where the suras or the godly beings live. The earth is in the middle, and then there are 7 lower planetary systems below the earth, which are inhabited by asuras or materialistic beings. You see, if those who are interested in ascension, those who are interested in evolution, rise to the upper planets. The earth, however, is considered to be the most special of all. It is considered the place where there is an equal amount of suffering and an equal amount of pleasure. Whereas in the upper planets, the more heavenly planets, there's greater amounts of pleasure, and in the lower planets, greater amounts of suffering. The earth is in that unique place where there is equal amounts of pleasure and of suffering. So the result of that is we're kind of in the middle. We're muddled up a bit. We don't quite know how to deal with this. We find ourselves enjoying, but then we find ourselves also having lots of problems. We sometimes think the world is an incredible place, and we sometimes think the world is a really crappy place, right? And as a result of which, we can find ourselves being tossed back and forth between that. We don't particularly want to give up the world because there are so many pleasures here and so many wonderful things to do and places to go and things to enjoy. But at the same time, yeah, we get old. Yeah, we die. There's all kinds of problems, politics, economics, all kinds of stuff. And so it's a hard pill to swallow. But this idea of creation is very interestingly being now backed up by quantum physics. So let me take you over to that. This is what some of the people are encapsulating. In fact, it sounds very much like the lotus stem and the idea of the upper planets and the lower planets. It's quite fascinating to see that scientists are conceiving of something very, very similar. I don't know if you've seen these kind of images before, but yes, this is kind of what they're coming up with. And they're going more and more along the lines of what the Bhagavatam says. Let's take a look at this. Some interesting animation there. Anyways, in every universe, actually in every universe, there is also what is known as Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. So you may have heard of these 3, Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, and they are present in every universe. They're also known as the Trimurti, Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. Brahma being in charge of creation. After his job of creation is done, he gets quiet. Vishnu is in charge of maintaining and protecting, and Shiva ultimately, he sits in samadhi, in meditation, and ultimately at the time when the universe is to be destroyed, he goes into his dance. And with that dance comes the destruction of the universes, then goes back into Mahavishnu, and then is breathed out again, and then again it starts all over again. Another interesting, more sort of modern, dramatic picture of the Trimurti, Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. That's for a more modern rendition of that. Okay. So we've got these 2 Vishnus so far. One is Karnodakshayi, who is the cause of all causes. So a lot of sort of like breathing out the universes and inhaling, and they get destroyed. The next is the Garbhodakshayi Vishnu, from whose navel the lotus emerges, and then Brahma, and Brahma begins the process of creation of all the planets and all of that. And finally, we have what is called the Shirodakshayi Vishnu. I know for those of you that are not familiar with Hindi or Sanskrit, this is going to be very complicated, but if you notice in that picture, it's the presence of God within everything and everyone. So let me take you back there again. You'll see this idea, this God being present within everything and everyone, within all creatures. All right. So this Shirodakshai Vishnu is the collective Paramatma present in all living beings. In other words, collective consciousness, as it has also been called in psychology, especially by Carl Jung and others. He is also known as Hari, and from him all the avatars or incarnations within the universe are expanded. Yogis meditate and experience and see this form within themselves. This is how they've described it, and this is what they've experienced. So I haven't, I cannot testify to that, but there are many yogis who have, so we'll go by that. Now, a key point comes into play. Why the creation at all? Why has this been created? For what purpose? There's a very simple answer that the Vedas give, especially the Srimad Bhagavatam. It refers to God as the supreme enjoyer. He is known as the Purusha. Purusha is the supreme enjoyer, and he creates for his enjoyment. Now, the problem is that because each of us is a tiny particle of the divine, of God, we have God-like aspirations and God-like qualities. We all want to enjoy. Our tendency to want to enjoy comes from God. We are made in his image. That is why we seek the things we seek. We seek happiness, we seek love, we seek abundance, because that is the nature of God. That is why it is so fundamental to each of us, and each of us seeks this. It doesn't matter what religion you belong to, whether you're an atheist, whether you're religious, whether you're from one religion or another. It doesn't matter how old you are or how young you are, whether you're an animal or a human. Every single creature wants the same things. They want to be loved, they want to be happy, they want to feel abundant, they want to have plenty of everything, because that is the nature of God. That is why. He is the supreme enjoyer, and therefore referred to as Purusha. Purush means the enjoyer. Actually, it means masculine, and we are all Prakriti, that which is to be enjoyed by the Supreme. So in that context, we become that which is to be enjoyed. Now think of, why do parents have children? They don't have children because they think, oh my God, one day this kid's going to become a teenager and is going to harass the heck out of me, maybe start taking drugs, maybe start going the wrong way, maybe become a thief, a criminal, or maybe go and shoot out a bunch of people in a school. They don't have kids for that reason. No parent would have kids if they could ever think like that. They think, oh my God, I'm going to bring this wonderful child into the world, and this child is going to grow up to be such an amazing human being, and I get to be part of that, and I get to love them, and I get to be able to give my everything to them. Yeah, that's what God thinks too. For about all of us. Doesn't think we're going to go off and become a Hitler or become someone who's going to invade other countries or cause harm to other people or become a psychopath. No, he doesn't think, no, that's not the plan. The plan is for us to come here to realize that the things we seek cannot be obtained in this world, no matter how much we try. We have been given the desire, but not the fulfillment. Everything we seek is temporary in this world. And therefore there's no real fulfillment. There is no eternal happiness, no eternal love, no eternal life, no eternal abundance. Everything is changing, everything is transitory, and everything is eventually taken away from us. So we have the longing, but not the fulfillment. The fulfillment arises when we understand a very profound truth. That I am not the Purusha, I am not the enjoyer of the world. The world existed before me, the world will exist after me. It was not made for my enjoyment. It was made for the enjoyment of God. And so was I. The living entity, the Atma, the soul, was made for the enjoyment of God. I've come to this material world to try and enjoy independent of God. But when I realize this is impossible, I then begin to understand that I am Prakriti. Prakriti is that which is to be enjoyed. So the Atma, the soul, ultimately finds its natural position, that of being enjoyed by Purusha or God, through either serving God, worshipping God, and ultimately loving God. It's a profound journey. This journey is for us to learn to go from, and to put it in very simple language, to go from thinking I am the enjoyer to realizing I am here to be enjoyed. I am here for the enjoyment of God, to serve God. And the more I give up my ahankara, my ego, the more I'm able to step into that place. You see, the ego would like to have you think that you matter, that you're important, that you are something special, that you are somehow incredible, and that everything is for your pleasure. That's the ego at work. We have to overcome that ego to be able to arrive at the place where we can actually realize I am God's beloved. I am here to love and be loved by God. And then this special bond, I receive everything I need. I no longer need to struggle, and I definitely do not need to suffer. None of that is necessary anymore. The suffering was coming because I was not recognizing who I am. That was the cause of suffering. All right, now we come to a very interesting topic, and this is so, I was telling you about how the different kinds of Vishnu. All right, now Vishnu doesn't just sit somewhere out there. Vishnu also comes into this world from time to time, and you'll be amazed at all the different avatars of Vishnu. Okay, so let's go into that. These are fascinating. These are avatars. You've all seen the movie Avatar, I'm sure, but this is not that kind of, some kind of, I don't know what they were referring to, some kind of alien being. This is actually the creator coming into this world as an avatar for different purposes at different times. So the avatars of Vishnu, let's get into it. The first kind are called the Shakti-avesh, or the empowered avatars. They come for a purpose. They come with a certain mission or a certain purpose in mind. And these empowered avatars, you might have heard of some of them. Well, let's start looking at them. All of them come to teach spiritual awakening and God consciousness according to time, place, and circumstances. So therefore, what they teach can vary and differ a lot. The earliest ones are the sons of Brahma. The sons of Brahma are known as the four Kumaras. They are the first ones who come to this world, and they teach the philosophical way of understanding the absolute truth. They start with a philosophical understanding because we all need a philosophical understanding. Otherwise, we go into blind belief. If we don't have a true, deep philosophical understanding of the absolute truth, we go in. Now, what is the problem with blind belief? It is that anyone can distort things, make us believe them, and then we just go right ahead. We become suckers. We become followers. We just go along like sheep with whoever's trying to tell us whatever they're trying to tell us. There has to be a practice. There has to be a philosophy. There has to be a clear understanding. That is why I encourage all of you to ask questions, to write down your questions, and then we'll take it up at the end of the talk. Right? So please do that. There's so much new information coming your way today. Be sure to write down your questions so I can take it up with you. Please don't believe anything here blindly. Don't agree with me. Don't believe me. Question everything. That is the Vedic process. The second incarnation is Narad. Narad Muni is also considered an empowered incarnation of Vishnu. Most people don't know that. They know of him as the transcendental spaceman. Well, let me show you the picture again. Narad Muni literally travels from across the universe singing the glories of Hari, of Narayan, and is known for his teachings. His teachings are the Narad Bhakti Sutra, the science of devotion. Then we have Kapila, right, and we'll be reading about him in the Srimad Bhagavatam later on in the later chapters. There will be, in fact, reading from most of these people's teachings. You'll come across a lot of different gurus and wise people, and many of them who were incarnations of Vishnu, who taught. So one of them was Kapila. He taught the Sankhya Philosophy that describes the real nature of the soul. Much of the Bhagavad Gita actually is based on the Sankhya philosophy, though it is different as well. This incorporates a lot more. But the Sankhya philosophy is the process for gaining knowledge, which includes perception, inference, and the testimony of source. In other words, being able to challenge your mind, being able to understand that what your mind is telling you is not necessarily true, to challenge perception, to challenge the inferences that we make, right? And the validity of the sources from which we are gathering that information. If we don't learn to challenge our mind becomes in charge of us. If we start becoming its blind followers. I've often called it the mind god. And we become like, we worship this mind. We believe everything it tells us. We bow down to it. We are its obedient servant. It's a sad state of affairs in today's time when people have not been taught to challenge their mind, that they've become servants of their mind. The mind has become the master, and we have become its servants. Such an upside down position. We as the soul need to be the one in charge. We need to be the master of the mind, but instead we have become its followers. And whatever it tells us, we believe blindly. It's a tragedy because people have not been trained in how to deal with the mind. This was something that was done in Vedic times right from the age of 5. Children were sent to Gurukul to learn how to master the mind, how to learn humility, how to learn compassion, how to learn connection with nature and with people. It's a fascinating culture that we can learn a lot from even today. All right, the next one that we have here is Brighupathi or Parshuram. So Parshuram is known to be quite the warrior. And he was a Brahmin Kshatriya, and he's depicted as a sage with an axe in hand. He was born to end the tyranny of the evil Kshatriya. So the warriors, the rulers, the politicians, the kings of that time had misused their powers and had made life miserable for people, as we sometimes start seeing now in our present time. And so his thing was to get rid of all the evil Kshatriyas and to bring justice and bring back Dharma into the world. You'll notice this theme again and again being played out of the re-establishment of Dharma. Then the next incarnation of Vishnu we have is Nara Narayan. And this incarnation is very special. These are the twin sage avatars of Vishnu who were born to ensure that truth, justice, righteousness, and other elements of Dharma would come back to the earth. All of them used different approaches. Someone used, weapons. Someone became a sage and taught, right? But however they did it, that was the intention, was to bring about justice, truth, righteousness, and Dharma on earth. Then we have Dattatreya. I know this is going to be an extensive list and you're going to wonder, why the heck are we going through all this? But you'll get to understand in just a few moments. Dattatreya is known as Trimurti because the Aditi, I think, was the mother of Dattatreya. She prayed to Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva that they would all come as one to her as her child. And so they did. He is a great master of yoga and was a great teacher. Then we have Yagya. And Yagya taught the ways of ritual where the fire is lighted and sacrifice is made and offerings to the demigods. Then we have Rishabh. Rishabh was the founder of Jainism. He was a great spiritual leader and it was believed that he had transcended the cycle of birth and death. He used to guide people on the path of salvation or moksha. So Jainism is very similar to Buddhism. And one of its founders was also an incarnation of Vishnu. This is getting interesting now. The next we have is Prithu. Prithu Maharaj was a great king, considered one of the first saintly kings. He is the one who was responsible for all the greenery and cultivation of all the crops on earth. He dedicated his life to the service of God and taught people the ways of Dharma. Common theme here. Then we have Dhanvanthari. Dhanvanthari, so these are all incarnations of Vishnu. And Dhanvanthari emerged holding a pot of Amrit, which is the nectar of immortality, in his hand. after the Devas and Asuras finished churning the ocean of milk. That's a long story. It'll come up in the Bhagavatam later on, but for now, we'll just have this mention. He's also known as the god of Ayurveda and is worshipped for gaining sound health. Then we have Vyasa, who we've mentioned earlier. He's the one who actually compiled the Vedas, put them all into writing. He was able to foresee that Kali Yuga was about to start 5,000 years ago, and so he divided the one Veda into various branches and sub-branches, like the Rig Veda, Yajur Veda, Samveda, Atharva Veda, so that the people of Kali Yuga can take advantage of this great wisdom. And then, another one who you'll be very shocked to see here is Buddha. Buddha is also an incarnation of Vishnu. It says in the Vedas that when materialism was rampant and materialists were using the pretext of Vedic authority to kill animals in sacrifice, Buddha appeared to stop the nonsense and establish the principles of nonviolence. He even asked them to reject the Vedas, the soul, and God. Buddha was born in Lumbini as Siddhartha Gautam. Later he became known as Gautam Buddha. He left his family and all material possessions in search of enlightenment. He founded Buddhism and taught people ways to end all kinds of suffering. So even Buddha is considered an empowered incarnation of Vishnu. I don't know if you knew that. All right, now we have the second category of avatars. They're called the Leela Avatars, or Leela means pastime. So these are avatars of Vishnu who appeared to be part of a particular pastime or a Leela. So there's a story going on, there's something happening in the world, and then there's a way that Vishnu will dress up, maybe get into a certain costume, a certain different species, or whatever else it might be, and he'll then assist that situation along. Quite fascinating. So despite the difference in form or time, all Vishnu's incarnations had one common goal: to end all evil and re-establish Dharma. It is for this reason that Vishnu is known as the protector and preserver of the universe. So the first one we'll look at here is Varaha. Varaha means a boar. So he came with a very specific intention. The Varaha avatar came to slay the Asura Hiranyaksha and to save the earth, Bhumi, the personification of the earth, and restore her to the surface from a sinking state. So the earth was actually sinking and was going to be completely vanquished when Varaha came, placed the earth on his tusks and brought her back into orbit. Otherwise the earth was going out of orbit and would have been destroyed. Varaha is half man, half boar, incarnation of Vishnu. Then we have Matsya. Now this is a very interesting one because you've all heard about this story, the story of the flood, right? Which is mentioned in the Bible as well. Well, it's mentioned in the Vedas 3,000 years before the Bible. And in that it mentions about how all these animals and all the species were placed onto this boat. And then the boat was about to sink, at which point Vishnu appears as a fish to guide and so to pull that boat. Right? They were able to put Vasuki actually around Vishnu and then tied to the boat, and then with that the boat was taken to safety. So once again, take a look at the picture and you'll see what I'm talking about here. He's also sometimes referred to as a half human, half fish, but actually more of the fish incarnation. The next is Kurma. Kurma is a giant tortoise. This giant tortoise, this half tortoise, half man form of Vishnu during the churning of the ocean of milk. Again, that's a story that is there in the Bhagavatam. They needed to place a mountain, Mount Mandara, on this tortoise actually. So it was a giant tortoise on which they placed this mountain, and then using this particular Vasuki, they churned the ocean of milk. And then from that came this nectar which was meant to give immortality. And then both the Asuras and the Suras, the demigods and the, well, if I want to use the word demons, but I think I'm just going to stick to non-divine beings, I guess we'll call them that. Maybe they're demonic, I don't know. they came and they, so this nectar was created, and then they tried to fight over it, right? At which point Vishnu appeared again, and this time in the form of Mohini as a beautiful woman, and she convinced the Asuras, hey, give me the pot of nectar, which is going to give immortality, and I will distribute it to everyone, and especially to you people. But she didn't do that at all. Instead, she ran away and gave it all to the Suras, the Devas, the demigods. So that's Mohini Murti, was considered extremely beautiful, feminine incarnation of Vishnu. These different pictures. Yeah. She's also responsible for having cut off the head of Rahu. And if you're into Vedic astrology, you'll know that Rahu then became two planets, Rahu and Ketu. But I don't know much about Vedic astrology, so I'm not going to deal with that. Then comes Narasingha. This is from the story of Prahlad. We'll be talking about this at quite great length because there's some incredible teachings of the boy Prahlad. Prahlad is 5 years old, and he is being tormented and tortured by his father because he happens to be, Prahlad, the little boy, happens to be a lover of Vishnu, of God, and his father is someone who hates Vishnu. He is an Asura. He hates anything to do with God. He's an atheist. And so eventually the father gets so fed up of his son. He's a king, he's very powerful, he's very megalomaniac kind of guy. And then he's like so fed up with his kid, he says, you know what? This kid is not my kid. I'm not going to, put up with his nonsense. Have him killed. Off with his head. So he tries different ways. Throw him into a pit of snakes, throw him in fire, do all kinds of things, but can't kill this boy. Vishnu is protecting him all the time. Ultimately, Hiranyakashipu challenges Prahlad, and he talks, because Prahlad is saying, my God is everywhere. He's in everything. So he says, oh, is he in that pillar? And then Hiranyakashipu goes and smashes the pillar, saying, where is your God? And then Vishnu comes as a half man, half lion. There's a whole story behind it, why he comes in this form, because Hiranyakashipu, among other things, had got a blessing, a boon, that he could not be killed by any human or any animal. So therefore, when Vishnu wanted to protect Prahlad, he comes as both half lion and half human to protect the little boy Prahlad, who you'll see on the left side. Right? And he rips him up. The story is very detailed, and I will go into it when we reach there. But it's what's coming up. So you're getting a little preview of what's going to be coming up. But within all the stories and incarnations are incredible teachings that you'll come across. Then we have the story of Vaman. Vishnu came as a dwarf to the king Bharat. And this was also to teach the king a big lesson about, because he was the most powerful king at the time. And he thought, I can give anything, I can do anything. So again, the story is there in the Bhagavatam, we will go into it later. And then we have the incarnation of Ram. Ram is in the middle, his wife Sita is on the right, his brother Lakshman is on the left, and that's Hanuman, who you see kneeling before him. A lot of people make the mistake thinking of Hanuman as the monkey god. Hanuman is not a monkey god. That's so insulting. Hanuman is the son of Vayu, the wind god. And yes, in one sense, one could say he's a deva or a kind of god. But he is really the servant of Ram. He is so in that mood of seva, of serving Ram. And he there assists Ram through the entire pastime. When Ram comes to this earth, Vishnu comes to this earth, again for that purpose of destroying Ravan, who is this incredibly asura person who is causing havoc on the planet. At that time, Ram incarnates and shows the example of being the ideal king. Ram is considered the perfect ruler. And although there are many questions about his rule and so on and so forth, but those can all be talked about. Again, his Leela and his pastimes will be coming across them in the Bhagavatam as well. The next incarnation we have is that of Balaram. This is the brother of Krishna. And Balaram is his elder brother, actually. and is known for his strength, for carrying a plow and a gada or a mace. He was the teacher of Duryodhana and Bhishma. He shares many adventures with Krishna, which include bringing the tyrannical king Kans to justice. And then, of course, we have Krishna. This is Krishna as a baby eating butter. Now, many people think that Krishna is an incarnation of Vishnu. And we're going to come across a verse in the Bhagavad just a little bit as soon as I finish showing you all these pictures, where it talks about how Krishna is not an incarnation of Vishnu. Although he comes within that list of the incarnations, he is considered Bhagavan Swayam. He is considered the original Bhagavan, who is there even before Vishnu. But I'll wait till I get to that verse and then I'll confirm that for you. Meanwhile, let's enjoy these pictures. And that's another picture of Krishna playing his flute with the peacocks and the cows and animals of Vrindavan. And there he is again. Krishna incarnated to protect his devotees, to rid the earth of evil and establish the principles of Dharma. And finally, the final incarnation is known as Kalki. This Kalki avatar, as he's called, appears at the end of Kali Yuga. He is the only one that has not come yet. He comes to annihilate all the miscreants at that time and to usher in a golden age. So this age of quarrel, hypocrisy, and dissension ends with the advent of Kalki. And after he does that, we usher in a Satya Yuga, a golden age, in which, once again, now you have just life goes back to being beautiful, in other words. Yeah. He's depicted as a warrior riding a white horse and holding a shining sword. Same ideas there in the Bible, incidentally. It's so interesting when you see these parallels and you wonder, they definitely had a strong influence of the Vedic culture on them in biblical times in Judea. Even the Old Testament, there's a lot of references, such as the flood and so on and so forth, which you've come across here. Finally, we have, Vyasa we've talked about already. So, all right. So let's now get into the Bhagavatam itself. Let's go into those few verses that are there in the Bhagavatam, which tell us about these things. I'm going to pull that up for you. So it goes off here saying the incarnations of God are innumerable, like rivulets flowing from inexhaustible sources of water. So they're not just a few, these are just a few. But it says the incarnations of God are innumerable. By the way, Prabhupada also would say that Jesus was an empowered incarnation. He came with a purpose to establish the ideas of love of God. Of course, you know what happened to him and then how they distorted his teaching. But, he acknowledges that, Christ himself was a very empowered being, Son of God or whatever else. I don't know, but but I do know that he was definitely pure of heart and was teaching something wonderful. So then it continues in the Bhagavad. Eti cham shapkala pumsa krishnastu bhagavan swayam. This is the part that I was getting to, which says, of all the incarnations, Krishna stu Bhagavan Swayam, that he is himself Bhagavan, the Supreme Being. And the translation goes like this: of all the above mentioned incarnations, Sri Krishna is the original personality of Godhead. All of them appear on planets wherever there is a disturbance created by the atheists. Krishna himself, one of his primary purposes is to protect those who are theists and those who are lovers of God. Whoever carefully recites the mysterious appearances of Vishnu and of God with devotion in the morning and evening gets relief from all the miseries of life. The conception of the Virat, or the universal form of God, which we talked about in the Bhagavad Gita, as appearing in the world, is imaginary. It is to enable the less intelligent to adjust to the idea of God's having a form. But factually, God has no material form. I think this is a really important piece to understand. All of these incarnations, including Krishna, do not have material form. They come, as Krishna says in the Gita, he says, I come in my original transcendental form. I give you the eyes by which you can see me. In other words, he is spirit, making himself manifest to us. He does not come in a body like ours that is subject to aging and death and so on. Krishna comes in his spiritual body and therefore never ages. In fact, although he lived for about 120 years, or was in this world for 120 years, we shouldn't really say lived, because he was there and then he disappeared. In that time, he never gets older than 16. That's because he comes in an eternal spiritual body. When he leaves, it is on some pretext, like there's some hunter shoots an arrow onto his foot, and with that arrow he disappears. And so, of course, some people say, well, look, he died from the shooting of an arrow. Well, listen, people don't die from the shooting of an arrow on your foot. So that's not quite how it works. But that was just Leela. Those are the pastimes. And that is how he makes it, so it's to create an excuse for it's time to go. Clouds and dust are carried by the air, but less intelligent persons say that the sky is cloudy and the air is dirty. Similarly, also they implant material bodily conceptions on God. Beyond this gross conception of form is another subtle conception of form, which is without formal shape and is unseen, unheard, and unmanifest. The living being has this form beyond his subtlety. Therefore, if the living being did not have this spiritual form, or subtle form, could not have had repeated births and deaths, because after all, we leave this body behind. And then what goes out of this body is spirit. So therein is the evidence of spirit even for each of us, what to say of God. Whenever a person experiences by self-realization that both the gross and subtle bodies have nothing to do with the pure self, at that time he sees himself as well as God. Get this clearly. Whenever a person experiences by self-realization that both the gross and subtle body have nothing to do with who you are, with the pure self, at that time you see yourself as well as God. If this illusory energy or Maya subsides, the living entity becomes fully enriched with the knowledge by the grace of God, and then he becomes at once enlightened with self-realization and becomes situated in his own glory. Thus, learned sages describe the births and activities of the unborn and inactive Krishna, who is undiscoverable even in the Vedic literatures. He is the Lord of the heart. His activities are always spotless, and he is the master of the six senses and is fully omnipotent with six opulences. He creates the manifested universes, maintains them, and highlights them without being in the least affected. He is within every living being and is always independent. The foolish, with a poor fund of knowledge, cannot know the transcendental nature of the forms, names, and activities of God, who is playing like an actor in a drama, nor can they express such things, neither in their speculations nor in their words. Only those who render unreserved, uninterrupted, favorable service unto the lotus feet of Krishna, who carries the wheel of the chariot in his hand, can know the creator of the universe in his full glory, power, and transcendence. This Srimad Bhagavatam is the literary incarnation of God, and it is compiled by Srila Vyasadeva, the incarnation of God. It is meant for the ultimate good of all people, and it is successful, all blissful, and all perfect. This Bhagavad Purana is as brilliant as the sun, and it has arisen just after the departure of Sri Krishna to his own abode, accompanied by Dharma, Gyan, that is religion, knowledge, etc. Persons who have lost their vision due to the dense darkness of ignorance in the age of Kali shall get light from this Purana. When Shukdev Goswami recited Bhagavatam there, in the presence of Emperor Parikshit, I heard him with rapt attention, and thus by his mercy I learned the Bhagavatam from that great and powerful sage. Now I shall try to make you hear the same thing as I learned it from him and as I have realized it. All right, so we end the Bhagavatam reading here. Now I would love to take up any questions you might have. Give me a moment and I will switch over to Zoom. If you haven't had a chance to write down your questions, please write them now. Or you can just come on and ask me. All right, who's got a question? Rima, 1 second. I'm not hearing you. Let me see why. Okay, say something. No?
Is that any better?
I hear you now. Yes. Okay, so no problem at this end. Yes, Rima. I'm sorry that was very long. And thank you for all your patience.
Yeah, no problem. Listen, I've managed to get a little confused. Who is the person writing this?
Kalki.
You're talking in the first person. Kalki.
Oh, no.
Kalki,
Who is writing?
No. Yes.
Or who is speaking? There's a difference.
I see.
So the writing is done by Vyas.
I remain confused.
Okay, the writing is done by Vyas, and the speaking, I will show you a picture here. Let me see, for that I will have to go back to, okay, hold on a second. I gotta juggle a few things here, but I'll show it to you right now. All right, you can see this picture now? So the speaker of the Bhagavatam is Shukdev, and the king Parikshit is asking him. Okay? And the person who is speaking is someone who was in the audience listening. That person's name is Sutta Goswami. So he is the one who is in fact speaking, and what he has heard from the great this conversation that took place. Now, who is this King Parikshit and who is this Shukdev? It's coming up soon. We're going to be hearing about the whole story as to how the Bhagavatam got to be spoken. The story is about a king who was cursed to die in 7 days. And so he wanted to know, he wanted to prepare for death. He called all the rishis and sages together to ask these questions. And what emerged was the Bhagavatam. It was recited over a 7-day period. And so that's sort of the background of this whole conversation.
Okay.
I have a question.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. In regards to the many planets, is it possible to reincarnate in a different planet? And for like enlightened beings who like live on this planet, is it possible that they came from other planets?
Yes, it's very possible that they've done the journey, gone to higher planets, then come back to the earth. It's also possible that, you see, here's what happens. When you do good karma, you get elevated to the higher planets. Now, either you come back here and you get born in a family of very wealthy people, or you have a nice, beautiful body, or you have certain other benefits that come, or you go to the higher planets. But Krishna says something very important in the Gita, and he says that whether you go to the highest planets where there is much greater pleasure and enjoyment, or whether you go to the lowest planets where there is more suffering, all of them are ultimately places of suffering wherein repeated birth and death take place. Let's say if you have the most wonderful life, you have all the riches in the world, you have a beautiful, gorgeous body, you live for millions of years, but eventually you die, you leave it all behind. And now the person who loses something great, like if you were rich and then you lost your riches, that feels horrible. If you never had it and you lost it, well, there's nothing you lost, right? If you have a lot, like if you have a beautiful body when you're young, then you get older, like a famous movie star or somebody, right? And then they get older and now they don't have that beautiful body anymore. It's really heartbreaking, right? And so it is with going to these higher planets, because you have everything that you might aspire for and long for and desire while you're here on earth. So a lot of people who do good karma, they may get all these things, but Krishna recommends against that. He says the point is not to go towards good karma, but rather to become free of karma altogether. That's the idea. And to stop reincarnating and to stop coming back here. So he says the one who understands this science never comes back to this temporary and miserable world.
Mm-hmm. Got it. Yeah, very interesting.
Thank you for your questions. I so value and appreciate your questions. It means a lot. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. May I ask another one if there's no
Sure.
other
There is
questions?
time, yes.
Yeah. So, if really like the goal is to be free of karma, is it really like the non-attachment, Viragya that we're, like searching
Vairagya,
for,
yes,
that we're
absolutely.
like aiming for?
Exactly. So we've been talking about non-attachment and Vairagya as we did the Gita. And the idea of Vairagya or non-attachment is this. It's not about giving up the world. It is recognizing that nothing is mine. It's a simple understanding. And if you really begin to live by that, you have achieved what even people who renounce and become monks have not achieved sometimes. Sometimes they give up everything, but then they become attached to their ashram, or they become attached to their monastery, right? But if you, sitting in your home with everything you have, realize that none of it belongs to you, neither this body, nor this mind, nor the things you have, nor the people you love, right? You will become detached. One of the biggest problems you'll see in relationships comes from jealousy. What is that jealousy? The feeling that this person is mine. Mine is the cause of suffering, right? If we lose our money, my money was lost, my house was lost, my family member died. All of that causes suffering because of one word, mine. Right? So if you learn to really snap out of this one word and realize that everything belongs to God and nothing belongs to me. Everything existed before I did, everything will exist after I die. Then you're free. Practice this daily, moment to moment, and just see how it changes your life. All right, let me see if anybody else has a question.
I do, Rohit.
Hi, Mariah.
Hello.
Hi.
Mine is a feminist question.
Absolutely.
All right, because I don't remember the third demigod, but it was Vishnu and it was Shiva.
Yes.
But the third one was also male, and those were the three that you presented as kind of the next level.
Yes.
And Krishna is also presented as a male. And I know that there's areas in Hinduism where there's a female entity.
There are a lot of female entities.
But the hierarchy feels super male right at the top. And so I'd love for you to speak to that, because
thank you so much for bringing that up.
I'm kind of calling a little BS on it right now. So
absolutely.
I want you to,
let's call the BS.
All right.
Okay. So here's the deal. The hierarchy is this. If you look at even Krishna does the talking. But Krishna there in his home, massaging the feet of Radha, putting her on the pedestal. He is the one who worships Radha, not the other way around. So the feminine is worshipped by him. He is the spokesperson who comes in front, speaks the Gita, does the fighting in the battles. But in his private chamber, and in fact in Vrindavan when I go there, they tell people, don't even worship Krishna, worship Radha. Radha is the ultimate. The goddess Radha is the ultimate. Krishna bows to her. So go to her and she will then give you everything Krishna can give you and so much more. She is the embodiment of compassion. She is the embodiment of love. She is the place through whom you will learn true love of God. Krishna gives the philosophy, the intellectual, logical stuff. And most of these people we talked about, they were teaching Dharma to people. But behind Shiva is Parvati, who is known as Goddess Durga. Goddess Durga is the one, Shiva is in his meditation. He doesn't care about anything. Durga is the one who interacts with the devotees and gives them the blessings. That worship of the goddess is profound. So each to their own. The Vedic system is, here's different options. You go with what appeals to you the most. It is not about putting anyone into any box. But do understand the different subtleties so that you may find what is right for you. Does that answer any of your question? Or?
Yeah, it's a good door to open.
Okay.
Well, along those, Srima again, along those lines, what struck me was that the universe came out of a womb, right? So the feminine is incorporated all along.
Yes. In fact, if you look at Vishnu, who's lying down, the universe emerges out of his. He is actually both masculine and feminine, because otherwise, how does he have a womb? Yeah, he is
But
garbo.
except for that, his womb is a navel.
It's
So
from
it's
the
not
navel
really,
that
it's not
lotus
really a
emerges.
womb, it's a navel.
But just like you see, the mother has an umbilical cord. The baby is attached with the umbilical cord. That
Right.
umbilical cord is actually the stem of the lotus. And in that stem come all the planets. And so when I showed you the images of what modern science is now portraying, they're showing something that goes kind of like this and then goes down and then comes out like that. Did you notice some of those pictures I was showing you? I don't know if you caught them early.
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
And so they remind me of that same idea that the universe is within this cylindrical kind of thing, which is resembling what they're. So I know that in the Vedic times, they were trying to put it into simplistic language, what they were seeing with their mystical vision. And they were trying to put it in a way that human beings could understand. We can tend to get a bit literal about this, but they were, it's like trying to explain very difficult concepts to very dull human beings like us. So that's how I see it. And now when you can add a little flavor of quantum physics and all the research that is being done, it's starting to make a lot more sense to the logical mind. All right, this was a lot of work putting it together, and I'll end with that. I look forward to seeing you next week. Jai Shri Krishna.
Thank you,
Hare
Rohit.
Krishna. Jai Shri Krishna. See you next week.
Rohit.
Thank you.
You're welcome.